Hi everyone, I'm Sandy and welcome back to my channel. Today I have my July reading wrap up for you, where I talk about the books that I actually read in July. And so if it's a book that I've already talked about, I'll just mention it briefly. Otherwise, I'll talk a lot more about the books that I ended up reading. I had ended up having a really interesting reading month because I was sick at the beginning of the month and I thought I hadn't read that many books, and it turns out I read far more than I thought I was going to. And I read books that weren't on my TBR. I don't know what happened. I think part of it was just coming back from being sick. I wanted to pick up some easy books, some fun books, and I definitely always read those much faster than if I'm reading a classic. And so, yeah, there's a lot to talk about today. What I'm going to start with are the books that were on the 1001 book countdown that I have already talked about. And so there are 4 of those. Here they are. And so those 4 are Mansfield Park by Jane Austen. This was my book club pick for July, and it was the last of the 6 main Austen novels that I had left. And sadly, it was my least favorite of the 6 Austens. So yeah, if you want to learn more about what I thought about this book, I will certainly leave a card for you where you can go and check out that video. But yeah, there's just something. Maybe it's just I found all of the other Austens more compelling. But yeah, this one ended up being my least favorite Austen. The other ones that I have are The House of Ulloa by Amelia Pardo Bazan, and this particular book ended up taking me almost 2 full weeks to read because I was reading this right when I got sick, and so this was probably the book that was the hardest for me to pick up and the one I was procrastinating to pick up just because my brain did not want to focus on a classic. It's also one I had a big gap in reading. Maybe it's one I should reread at some point, but I have already talked about it. So that's the second book off the countdown that I finished. The third book is The Robber Bride by Margaret Atwood. I read this as a buddy read with my friend Angela, and it was wonderful reading with her as usual. I have talked about this one already. I love showing these copies. So this particular one, I ended up loving the first 3/4, and then the last quarter just let me down a little bit. But the rest of it, the first 3/4, oh my gosh, such a great book. And the last quarter, but that was the third book. And then the last book that I've already talked about is Jude the Obscure. I did this as a buddy read with Kristen from Enter the Book, and that was lovely to be able to read that with her. I find the response to this particular book really fascinating on BookTube. So I have had so many comments about Jude the Obscure when I did my 1001 book countdown video about it. People seem to either love or hate this book. There is no middle ground, it seemed like. So I'm really curious in the comments, are you a love or a hate of Jude the Obscure? Are you a love or hate of Hardy? So yeah, this one seems to have quite a wide spread of feelings about it. So for me, I was really enjoying it, really loving the story until one particular point, and then it lost me a bit. So I thought it was good. I didn't think it was great. Okay, so those are the 4 off of the 1000 book countdown that I've already talked about that I finished, but I finished more that will be in the video this weekend. So I'm super excited because I have Passing by Nella Larsen, which I will be talking about this weekend. And then I also have Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskill, which will be in my countdown this weekend. Unbelievable that I ended up finishing 6 books off of the countdown in July. It helped me get a bit caught up, which is phenomenal. But I will be talking about both of those this weekend. As far as what other books that were on my TBR, I have Murder Must Advertise by Dorothy L. Sayers, and this is the book that makes it so I did not finish my TBR. But if you look where that bookmark's at, this one will also be in the countdown this weekend. I came so close. I came close. And really, I'm doing this as a buddy read with Kevy at Say Kevy, and we intentionally slowed it down and just chose to read it at a slower pace. I don't regret that decision. I didn't want to rush and finish it in order to make July. I really wanted just to kind of take my time because it is one that it's just taking me a bit to get into. It took a bit to get into this story. So yeah, Dorothy L. Sayers' Murder Must Advertise was also on my TBR, but I haven't finished it. So yeah, that's the only one I didn't finish in July. I also had book 1 of Kristen Lavranstadder. I did finish book one of Kristen Lavranstadder in July. I also read more than that. I read part of the August reading, and I'm loving this book still. I think it's wonderful. There's so much to appreciate and like about this particular book, and I can't wait to talk about it in September. So if you go out to Goodreads, you will see this one on my list for a very long time because I am budding reading this with my friend Sonia over a period of 3 months. And so we're really taking this one very, very slow, which is great. All right, so now let's talk about the books that I have not shared with you or what I thought about them. So the first one of my reading goals is to read a nonfiction every single month. And for this month, it was The Soul of an Octopus by Cy Montgomery. This book, I loved this book. I really did. I think I gave it 4 stars. I probably should have rated it higher than that. This book follows Cy Montgomery, who is a naturalist and a writer who is going to an aquarium and really getting to interact with octopus in a way that we would never get to do. I don't think I would get to go just in and play with an octopus. Some of the pictures in here are terrifying, though. I can't imagine having an octopus with their arms all around me, but she got to experience that and got to experience many different octopus in this aquarium, and her feelings about them and how they interacted with her and the other people who were working there were just really wonderful, and in some ways really calming. Like this idea of you just basically are standing there with this octopus and interacting with it in this way that feels kind of magical and just kind of soft and feels kind of soft and lovely, and it just made me kind of want to go, I just want to give this book a hug and just, sit with it and enjoy. And I really did enjoy it quite a bit. There's also a section in here where Cy Montgomery is learning how to scuba dive. I am a certified scuba diver, and she goes diving in Cozumel, which is actually a place that I ended up learning how to dive. And she describes going on a drift dive. So if you're not familiar with a drift dive, what it is the boat will let you off at one end, and the current just takes you down, and the boat picks you up considerably farther away than where you started. And you just drift. You just get to ride the current along whatever reef or wherever you're at. It's one of my favorite dives I have ever done. It was absolutely incredibly magical. We saw a lobster that was massive when I went. She describes all the kinds of sea life that they saw. And when I was in Cozumel, our dive master took us through like this little hole, and you come out and you're in this Finding Nemo kind of area, and it was just absolutely magnificent. So this book brought back a lot of really positive and good memories for me, which is probably why I think pretty highly of it. But if you have an interest in sea life, if you have an interest in kind of this particular animal, it's absolutely fascinating. She does a very, very good job of just walking through her experiences, learning about these animals, about the different animals, how they respond. They're kind of Houdini-like in how they can escape things. That kind of part I think is really interesting and fascinating as well. But if you like outdoor books, if you like books about animals, this is a great one. I would highly recommend it. I found it really, really good. And it was exactly what I needed at the point that I was reading it. It says I was under a fair amount of stress this month. So yeah, but it was very calming and lovely, and I highly recommend it. All right, so my other goal that I have at every month is to read a new release. And this month it is Emma Straub's This Time Tomorrow. When I read the flap of this one, it had said that there was a relationship between the daughter and the father, and I was a little bit concerned because my parents have been going through a lot of health issues. I was worried that this would be difficult. It didn't turn out to be as difficult to read as I expected, because there's kind of a fantastical component to it that I was not expecting, and that kind of took me out of the emotional component of it and put me more in just kind of like what's going on here. I can't share too much about it because I feel like if I do that, it's a very big spoiler for what happens in this book. No, it was an enjoyable one. It was one that I picked up when I was starting to feel a little bit better. And so I really had a good time reading it, and it didn't hit me like I thought it was going to, but it met my requirement for a new release in July. So yay for that one. But then I ended up picking up another one, and I have shared this book in a book haul but haven't talked about it yet, and it is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This is a romance novel featuring a character who is a literary agent. One of the things I like about this book right at the beginning is she is very dismissive of tropes in romance books, which I thought was hilarious. Just reading through that part, her sister ends up arranging a trip for her and her sister to go to kind of like this location where a book that she represented was actually based. And so they have a list of things that she's supposed to try and do while she's there. And so you're expecting that kind of what they talk about in the book of the trope of meeting the hometown hero, saving a local business, all of those different pieces. And they actually have a list of those things. But this one doesn't follow necessarily that same trope in it. There is another literary person who actually is from that town who ends up being there kind of at the same time, and it's really more about them and about their relationship. And I really like their interactions. I like that it wasn't stereotypical. I had a lot of fun reading it. This is the kind of book when I wasn't feeling well that my brain would let me read. So it wasn't super complicated. It was a feel-good kind of one. Does it have stereotypical kind of ending to it? Maybe it does. But I'm reading a book about book lovers and book readers, and that was fantastic. That is really, I had a lot of fun with this particular book. If you're looking for something light, for something easy, something romancy, but not, smutty kind of romance, this might be a good book for you. It was just, frankly, a lot of fun. Outside of that, I've already talked about every book that's on my TBR, that was on my TBR for July, and I still have 2 more books. And this is kind of where, when I was at the very beginning of July, I was focusing on books that were that were different from what I would normally read, that weren't on the 1001 book countdown. They were just books that I had that I wanted to read at some point. And so when I wasn't feeling well and I didn't feel like reading very much, I just went to my shelf and picked out a book that I thought I would have a lot of fun reading. And the first one is A Court of Thorn and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. And so this is my first time reading Sarah J. Maas. And A Court of Thorn and Roses is the first one in a series. I have now 3 of the books in this series. I have the first one, the second one, and then the last one, which I actually won in a giveaway. But this one has a young girl who is supporting her family who is starving in a very, very cold environment. And she goes out and kills a wolf. And from there, everything just changes in her life. There's a magical, fantastical component of this, and she ends up having to leave her home and go, and I don't know how to talk about this book without really spoiling it. It is a young adult kind of a book. It's not one that is again explicit necessarily, at least in this particular book, but it is about the relationship of one of the members of the court and this young girl who ends up having to go and live away from her family in order to follow the rules kind of this world, I guess, is kind of how I would explain it. I'm not explaining it very well. It was a lot of fun. Was it super deep? No. Are there problems with it? Sure. But I honestly just picked it up to just try it and see what I would think of it, see if this was a genre or a series that I would like. Like I said, I have picked up the second book already, so it clearly was one that I enjoyed. I really want to find out what happens kind of in the next one. I really liked some of the components of this book enough, like I said, to make me pick up the second book. But A Court of Thorn and Roses was a very unexpected book that I picked up that I actually enjoyed. And then I have my last book, and this is my biggest disappointment of the month. And I had never read a book by this author. Again, it wasn't on my TBR. I had it on my shelf and decided to read it, and it is Big Summer by Jennifer Weiner. I apologize, I can't get the sticker off very easily, and then I just gave up. So I don't know. So Big Summer by Jennifer Weiner. I wanted to read a Jennifer Weiner because I know that she often features plus-sized or different sized women in her books. And I am all for that. I think it's great to have representation in books. And so I was ecstatic about picking up this particular book. And in the beginning, you do have a young woman who has a pretty traumatic kind of event. Well, she's out with some friends that changes her perspective forever. And she just starts to become more accepting of herself, more accepting of her body. And that part I thought was really interesting and a good component of this book. And then it just kind of goes all different directions. I could not figure out, is this a romance? Is this a murder mystery? Is this a revenge story? Like, what is this trying to accomplish? And I was so frustrated because I thought, I mean, the cover makes me think romancy, and then it takes a big turn, and I couldn't quite figure out what it was trying to be. And that's probably my biggest complaint about this. I don't know if you've read any Jennifer Weiner, if this is a anomaly with this book, or if I should try another one of her books. I just was super disappointed in this particular book. I really wanted to love it. And I just found it was trying to do too much, trying to be too much. If it would have been a romance, probably would have been great. If it would have been a murder mystery, probably would have been great. But it had so many components in it, and I just was annoyed and frustrated with it. There's also a reference to like other literary characters in it, which is kind of weird. So it just, unfortunately, it just didn't work for me. Please let me know in the comments though if you love her books. Am I missing something? But yeah, big summer, very big disappointment, unfortunately. So that is what I have for my July reading wrap up. Like I said, had a very large number of books that was unexpected. I had a lot of fun reading all of these books. I'm so glad I picked up some just books that aren't part of my normal genre. What did you read in July? What was your favorite book in July? What of the ones I read was your favorite if you've read them? But as always, like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, everyone, thanks.